1:20 a.m. Sloviansk na Kuban, deep inside the Russian interior. The night shift at this sprawling oil refinery usually involves nothing more dangerous than fighting the urge to sleep. But tonight, the air itself is vibrating with a low, menacing hum that sounds suspiciously like a flying lawnmower. High above the crude distillation unit, a 50-kilogram warhead strapped to a Ukrainian Lyuti drone is screaming down in a terminal dive, closing the gap between profitable asset and scrap metal in less than 3 seconds. Time to impact. 2 seconds. 1. Impact. The darkness is instantly ripped apart by a blinding flash of orange and yellow as the primary distillation tower, the beating heart of this facility, is vaporized by a thermobaric charge. The shockwave shatters windows 2 miles away, and suddenly, millions of dollars of Russian crude oil are no longer fuel for tanks, but fuel for a bonfire visible from space. If the Kremlin thought they could plunge Kyiv into darkness without consequences, they just received a burning receipt written in fire and steel. Stay focused, because while the flames are impressive, the tactical genius behind this strike is hiding in the dark, waiting for the Russian fire trucks to arrive before delivering the real punchline. Now, surely the Russians protect their cash cows? Oh, they do. This facility was wrapped in a steel blanket of the Kremlin's finest toys. Sitting on the perimeter was the Buk M3 Viking, a monstrous surface-to-air missile system that NATO pilots talk about in hushed tones. This beast can track 36 targets simultaneously and swat flies out of the sky from 40 miles away. Backing it up was the ZSU-234 Shilka, a 4-barreled anti-aircraft tank that spews 2,000 rounds of 23mm lead per minute, basically a heavy metal chainsaw designed to turn aircraft into confetti. And for the smaller threats, squads equipped with Rex 1 anti-drone guns, looking like sci-fi villains, ready to jam signals and drop quadcopters like stones. To the untrained eye, penetrating this bubble isn't just difficult, it's a suicide mission. The Kasta 2E2 radar acts like an all-seeing eye that never blinks. On paper, nothing larger than a sparrow should be able to get within 10 miles of those tanks without being blown into the next dimension. You don't park a $50 million Viking missile system next to a rusty shed unless that shed is printing money. And Sloviansk is essentially a giant ATM for the Russian Ministry of Defense. The specific target, the crude distillation unit, isn't something you can buy at Home Depot. It is a massive custom-built tower worth over $50 million alone. And here's the kicker. It relies heavily on Western components that sanctions have made illegal to import. Surrounding this tower are reservoirs of A95 aviation fuel and gasoline, representing millions in potential revenue sitting there like a volatile bank vault. The total value of the infrastructure in the crosshairs tonight exceeds $400 million. This facility feeds the Druzhba pipeline, the literal lifeline of Russian oil exports. Destroying this doesn't just make a loud noise, it stops the cash flow required to pay soldiers and build missiles. But wait, there is one more layer to this high-stakes poker game. The Russians were betting on a brute force attack, but Ukraine brought a calculator to a gunfight. At exactly 1:15 a.m., the sleepy operator inside the Kasta 2E2 radar truck sees his worst nightmare materialize as 30 hostile contacts suddenly flood his scope. Panic instantly grips the command center because it looks like the entire Ukrainian Air Force has decided to visit Krasnodar. But the truth is far more embarrassing for the second-best army in the world. These aren't high-tech predators. They are the AQ-400 Scythes, a swarm of plywood drones powered by loud, primitive engines that cost less than a used sedan. Ukraine isn't trying to blow up the refinery with these flying 2X4S. They are strictly here to ring the doorbell and run away. It is a tactical seduction, forcing the terrifying Buk M3 Viking to wake up and turn on its active radar, revealing its exact position to everyone listening. The Russian commander, sweating in his booth and eager to report a victory to Moscow, falls for the trap and authorizes a full engagement. Multi-million-dollar interceptors scream into the night sky, their rocket motors burning through the taxpayers' rubles at a terrifying rate, chasing down drones made of hardware store materials. The sky erupts in a chaotic web of tracer, fire, and missile contrails as the Russians furiously punch the air, convinced they are repelling a major assault. They are celebrating every hit, watching the wooden debris rain down, completely unaware that they are just depleting their ready racks on cheap decoys. Every empty launch tube is a silent high five to the Ukrainian planners. But stay with me, because while the Russians reload, they are about to make a lethal error. As the last burning piece of plywood flutters to the ground, a triumphant calm settles over the battery. The Russian crews, feeling like absolute gladiators, pop the hatches to inspect their victory. The Shilka commander is likely lighting a cigarette, high-fiving his gunner while gazing at the burning debris. They are frantically radioing headquarters, bragging about intercepting 100% of the threats, already dreaming of the medals they will pin on their chests. It is a scene of utter jubilation and staggering incompetence. They laugh at the primitive Ukrainian drones, mocking the wooden frames, completely oblivious that they have been played like a cheap fiddle. The barrels of their anti-aircraft guns are glowing cherry red, physically warped from heat and useless until they cool. The majestic Buck M3 is now just a heavy, empty truck, requiring a specialized crane and 45 minutes of sweat to reload. They are vulnerable, exposed, and distracted by their own ego. They think the show is over, treating this like a football match where the whistle has blown. But here is the catch the Russian planners missed. Silence isn't safety. It is just the deep breath before the scream. Little do they know, Ukraine has already RSVP'd to this party with a very special guest that is currently entering the terminal phase. The premature victory party is violently interrupted by a sound that freezes the blood in their veins. The distinct, high-pitched whine of a turbojet engine screaming across the tree line. This is not the buzzing of a lawnmower. This is the roar of the R-360 Neptune, a sea-skimming predator that Ukrainian engineers have taught to hunt on land. While the Russians were busy wasting their ammo on cardboard toys, this lethal ghost was hugging the terrain, flying below the radar horizon, invisible and unstoppable. It tears through the final perimeter at Mach 0.9, covering the distance of a football field in the blink of an eye. The Russian commander stares at his radar screen, his face draining of color as he realizes the magnitude of his mistake. He looks at his empty, smoking launch tubes, useless metal pipes that now serve as his tombstone. Desperation takes over. Soldiers who were laughing seconds ago are now scrambling over each other in the mud, screaming for air cover that isn't coming. They try to aim their rifles, a pathetic gesture against a warhead designed to sink cruisers. It is a moment of pure, unadulterated panic. The impenetrable air defense bubble has been popped by a simple bait and switch, leaving the crown jewel of the refinery naked against the incoming hammer. Stay focused, because the impact you are about to witness isn't just an explosion. It is the sound of Russian logistics snapping in half. The physics of destruction in the next millisecond is absolute poetry for the engineers watching, but a nightmare for the Russian accountants. The Neptune doesn't just hit the surface. Its semi-armor-piercing warhead utilizes sheer kinetic energy to punch through the 20mm thick steel skin of the distillation column like a hot needle through butter. This is crucial because of the delayed action fuse, which allows the missile to bury itself deep inside the tower's belly before waking up. Then, the laws of thermodynamics take over. The 300-pound warhead detonates, instantly converting solid explosive into a sphere of superheated plasma expanding at 7,000 meters per second. This creates a massive overpressure wave that ignores the concept of structural integrity, ripping the pressurized vessel apart from the inside out. But here is the lethal chemistry. The tower is filled with crude oil already heated to 350 degrees. When this pressurized liquid is suddenly exposed to the atmosphere, it doesn't just burn, it undergoes a boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion, or BLEVE. The shockwave vaporizes the crude into a fine mist, which instantly ignites, creating a thermobaric fireball that reaches temperatures hot enough to melt the support beams. The massive steel tower, now soft as spaghetti, groans under its own weight and collapses in a heap of twisted metal, taking the refinery's entire production capacity down with it. Let's tally the final receipt for this midnight barbecue, shall we? Ukraine's total investment for this entire operation, including the swarm of cardboard decoys and the Neptune, is roughly $300,000. That is pocket change in modern warfare. On the other side of the ledger, Russia just watched $50 million of hardware melt, plus the millions in lost revenue every single day this facility stays offline. And let's not forget the $4 million worth of advanced Viking missiles they wasted shooting at balsa wood. That is a return on investment of over 10,000%. Even the wolves of Wall Street can't promise numbers like that. The Kremlin is trading gold bars for sawdust, bleeding their economy dry to defend assets that burn anyway. This is how you win a war against a giant. You don't punch his face, you empty his wallet. So here is the question for the armchair generals. If you were Putin, do you keep building expensive refineries that can be deleted by cheap drones, or do you admit the strategy is failing? Let me know in the comments if this was a cheap trick or a strategic checkmate.